Hello, everyone. Welcome to Preemie Chats. Thank you for joining us today. I am Leah Whitehead. I am a preemie mom and a volunteer with the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation. The Canadian Premature Babies Foundation is also known as CPBF, and it is a charitable organization, and its mission is to support and educate Canadian families of premature babies. This Preemie Chat series is just one of the many ways that CPBF shares information with NICU families and healthcare professionals. Here every Friday, we talk with medical professionals, researchers, and families who share with us their NICU experience and knowledge. And we want you to be part of this discussion too. So please leave a comment or a question and let us know where you are watching from. I'd also encourage you to check out CPBF's website. It is canadianpreemies.org, and there you'll find all kinds of resources and support. Parents are the most important people and intervention a baby can have in NICU, but we know that the NICU itself can be disorienting. So on this website, you'll find resources like the new video series, Welcome to the NICU, that may make you feel like you just know a little bit more about the environment you find yourself in. And right now, in the face of the fears and anxiety brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, CPBF put together the Parent Care Program, and they offer 4 therapy sessions for families currently in the NICU or those who have been discharged up to 3 years. So to apply for that Parent Care Program and watch the videos, visit that website, canadianpreemies.org. And there's also a new section there on neonatal follow-up. So there's all kinds of resources and documents that you can check out about the neonatal follow-up programs. Now to today's topic. Historically, medical rounds have been an opportunity for healthcare professionals to assess their patient and then come up with a care plan. Now, at a time when more hospitals are including families on rounds, priorities are naturally shifting to include family values and focus on long-term outcomes and relationships. At the IWK in Halifax, the team is now attempting developmental rounds within their traditional medical rounds. They're discussing key developmental milestones, including neurodevelopment, positioning, and social relationships. Robbins is the physiotherapist in the IWK NICU and the perinatal follow-up program, and she's spearheading this initiative with an interdisciplinary team as they take a family-centered, holistic approach to medical rounds. It's been a very exciting project, and I've been involved in the development and helping, and so I'm really excited to talk about this today. And with Lori, who has been working with children and families as a physiotherapist for the past 16 years, and for the last 6 years, solely in NICU and in the perinatal follow-up program at the IWK Children's Health Centre in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Lori is passionate about protecting little brains and optimizing development at the earliest point in the lifespan. She has been active in the NICU and the PFU program using family-centered and trauma-informed principles to improve care and involve families in every step of their child's journey. She has provided extensive training and resources for staff in neuroprotective care, and she is a passionate and enthusiastic educator, which I'm sure will come out today as she joins us. She is joining us to talk about this new initiative of including developmental care into medical rounds. Thank you for joining us today, Lori.
Thank you, Leah. That was awesome. So it's really great to be here.
I'm going to put your presentation up and leave you to it because you have lots of ground to cover.
Okay, I have about 10 minutes. So we've been working at the IWK. We've been talking about developmental care for, it seems like, 1,000 years. Definitely as long as I've been there, much longer than that. And it's a great thing to talk about. The evidence is there. The resources are there. but really it's one of those things that takes a long time to put it into action. And so when Leah said that I'm spearheading this initiative, that's not exactly true. We have a really beautiful, dedicated group of people in our NICU who are passionate about developmental care. And so when we talk about developmental care, we think of it as thinking outside of the NICU. And that, of course, from the very first moment a family finds themselves in the NICU, we are planning for eventual discharge and thinking about the ways that we can help that family navigate being in the NICU and optimizing the development of a baby and of the family bond while they are there. I have the unique opportunity to work in NICU, but then also in our perinatal follow-up program. So I get to follow families all the way along. And sometimes I get to have some really beautiful conversations and honest conversations with families about what the experience has been like for them. And because we work in the NICU and becomes wallpaper to all of us, it's just an everyday thing. We forget that often in the NICU. It is some days are a family's worst day, even though for us it's just another day at the office. So when we think about trauma-informed care and developmental care, that's something that we try to keep in the front of our minds. So I know this is going to be a short little presentation, so I just want to give you snippets of what we've been up to at the IWK in our NICU as we've kind of passionately try to move forward, delivering care in a different way. So when we talk about developmental care, we talk about it as being an overarching way that we provide care instead of something extra that needs to be provided to the family. So it used to be something fluffy that we would do once all of the other tasks were taken care of. Then we thought about development. Now we're starting to think about the fact that development is something that we need to think about all the time. When I talk about development, I mean brain development, I mean sensory motor development, I mean social emotional development, and those things are intimately tied together, right? So early on, before the pandemic, which really threw a wrench into all of our plans, but we started a small group of us started developmental care rounds at the IWK. And so it was just a way for all of us to get together and talk about maybe next steps or what do we want this to look like. We really didn't have a plan, actually. And that was early in 2019. And I remember that day as being really exciting. I'm pretty sure we have a few pictures of all of us just looking like we just won the lottery because it felt huge to us. So it was a weekly meeting back then. And at the time, we used it as a way to liaise with all of the other committees that we find in the NICU, you know, the Neonatal Care Committee. We have an Always Together committee, which is parent partner led. And then there are all kinds of other committees that come around as needed. So one of the biggest things that we did as part of our very early developmental care rounds was start to use the SENSE program, which was out of the University of Washington. Now it's out of the University of Southern California. And it's an evidence-based program. I'll talk quickly about it in a minute. Most of you probably already know about it. So we really took that as a way as a jumping off point to start to educate staff and to educate families about what it looks like across the gestational ages in terms of sensory motor development and how we could implement that in our NICU. We started to organize some NICU staff education days that were specifically geared towards developmental care and also infant mental health. And they were really well received by staff. And so I felt like slowly but surely back then we were chipping away at just getting the foundational knowledge of the things that we wanted to achieve. And then we used it also to guide our staff orientation. So, you know, when we would hire new staff, they go through 5 days of NICU specific orientation. And it's kind of piecemeal. So what we wanted to do is try to provide this overarching framework of how we provide care as a philosophy of care. Instead of, this is, we're going to learn about this and then this and then this. First, we learn about developmental care, and then we learn about everything underneath kind of that umbrella. And then one of the things that really came up as we started sitting together in our developmental care rounds every week was this issue of unattended babies. And when I say unattended babies, I mean babies who find themselves with no caregiver at the bedside, which is something that we experienced, we thought, a little more often when we were in an open bay. We were an open bay unit. Then we went to single room care. We didn't think that we would have the same issues, but they followed us. And so it really got us thinking about how do we provide care for these infants who find themselves alone for whatever reason. So that was something that we identified as special concern. And so those were the babies who kind of took precedence over time. When we were doing developmental care rounds, we spent a lot of time talking about particular infants and families in that way. And then we got involved in some quality improvement initiatives as they became identified. So just quickly about the SENSE program, it was something that we had researched, then we purchased it for our unit, and it was lovely because it really gave us a framework of how to start this conversation. Now, the NICU Therapy Lab out of USC, they are who provide the program, so you buy the program from them. And they're rolling out their SENSE 2 now. It's very heavily evidence-based. And so SENSE 2 includes the newest evidence that they have found when researching and auditing the current SENSE program. It's really worked well for us. And what's great about SENSE is that it doesn't belong to anyone. So it's not as if the therapist needs to go in and be the person who's going to introduce it and implement it. It's everybody can do it. And on admission, we started doing it with every single family. So nursing does it. If I walk into the room and I notice that the family hasn't been introduced yet, I will do it. And it's a wonderful way to communicate with families every day how things are changing and how they can support their baby the best way. And so we really found it helpful for that. So I would have to say that for our developmental care rounds, that was one of the most positive things that came out of that. So then what happened was we took a step back and tried to reevaluate what our developmental care rounds were going to look like, because we didn't find we were really accomplishing a lot. We have a lot of babies and a lot of families, and there was, we couldn't have an hour or an hour and a half once a week and accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. And so we always imagined, wouldn't it be wonderful to incorporate developmental care into medical rounds? So it's just something that gets brought up every day with families instead of taking an hour or two once a week. And I found, we were traveling en masse into families' rooms with our little committee. We were so proud of ourselves to talk to them about developmental care. So we learned that was not something that was going to be sustainable in the long term. We just didn't have the time or the resources really to make that work. So then we had to take a step back. And of course, COVID happened. So it gave us a great opportunity to step back, because we really had to think about what our next steps were going to be. And this is just a quick little snippet of a sensory support, what sensory support would look like for 37 weeks. So from 23 to 40 plus weeks is what SENSE provides these bedside sheets for families. They're beautiful. This says preview because this is actually SENSE 2, and we have not purchased SENSE 2 yet. We're still on SENSE 1, and I have some beautiful changes from the last program in terms of developmental things. So then we went from having developmental care rounds once a week, where we had our social worker, our therapists, some of the bedside nurses, some people who we had identified as developmental care champions. We did have a couple of our neonatologists involved, and we decided to move it to a monthly meeting that was a little bit longer so that we could really think about and flesh out what our goals for this committee were going to be, because we were all passionate and we all had great ideas, but we did not yet have a plan for putting it all into place. So some of the goals that we came up with for our NDC committee, some of the projects we wanted to work on were Eat, Sleep, Console for our babies experiencing neonatal abstinence syndrome. We wanted to do a quality improvement project with our rates of plagiocephaly or head flattening in the NICU, which we found was, I work in the neonatal follow-up program. And so it was something that was really prevalent in babies when we would see them at follow-up. We talk about different positioning devices and equipment, safe sleep, and lots of other things. So we came up with all of these goals, things we wanted to accomplish. Since then, some of our goals have been already accomplished. And one of the things that we didn't talk about in NDC Committee, but something really wonderful that's come out of all of this, is identifying that families could really use access to our Nova Scotia Early Childhood Developmental Intervention Services. It's an early intervention program. Traditionally, babies would be referred to that program upon discharge. And now they are connected, especially if they're going to be more long-term, they are connected with those services while they're still in the hospital so that they can make those connections early on, because we were finding that there were families that we were losing to that kind of follow-up. And one of the really wonderful things that we've accomplished is our plagiocephaly QI project. We made really beautiful changes in how we offer care. This is just a graphic. There's a lot of information that I'm not going to go through. But one of the things that we did come up with was a change in practice. So we did a lot of education, and we did some, lots of, what would you call it? Like education sessions at the bedside. And then we would send out blurbs on our internal email and that kind of thing. And we came up with an acronym called Head Shapes Matter. And SHAPES is an acronym that helps us protect and preserve head shape when babies find themselves in the NICU. And you can see there, S is the supporting head in the midline whenever your baby's supine, changing the head of the bed every Sunday. And that was done, but it was very inconsistent. And so now the clinical lead will send a message every Sunday just to remind staff that the head of the bed should be changed. It's not always possible, given, it's of course still individualized to the infant if that can happen or not. But generally the head of the bed gets changed every Sunday. And it's a wonderful time to have that conversation with parents about how important it is that we change up positions from time to time. We did a lot of education about teaching staff how to assess head shape and how to identify if there's head flattening on one side or another. And that's done with every shift, kind of like with every check. And then position changes with each care time. And so that's anytime anything happens, baby is fed or a bum is changed, their position gets changed also. And then the E is early detection of referral to physiotherapy, because oftentimes it's detected, but the referral isn't made. And then, of course, skin-to-skin care early and often, whenever possible, and to alternate the side of head turning. So we put this into place, and we did find that there was a significant decrease in head flattening when babies came to our perinatal follow-up program. So it was really successful. So it's definitely a success story from our developmental care group. And then this is just an example of one of our little kind of education blurbs. So we would send one once a week with head shape myths. And we had a number of them. And this was just our first one, which is, the myth is head shape is just cosmetic. And then we give a little bit of education, and we go bed to bed, and we talk to families and nurses at the bedside. I don't know what that is. And then our next step from there was to add in a developmental care component to our medical rounds. It's something we've been talking about for a really long time. And quite frankly, it's not something that we still have managed to fully integrate, but it's baby steps for us. And it's something that we're talking about and trying. And so the things that we would talk about are all of the things that are important in terms of developmental care and neuroprotective care. And these are things that we already know. Most of us have had lots of education already. Now it's just a matter of putting it all into practice. And I know there's so many things to talk about in rounds. So we've gone back and forth how to offer this. We still don't have it nailed down, to be honest with you. But, we have our SENSE program, which is a great jumping off point. We really do continually talk about skin to skin care. And I find that over time, we need to kind of remind people, right? If you don't talk about it and you don't do it, it tends to get forgotten. So it's constantly educating and modeling for families and, making families kind of own that. Tummy time, of course, and head shape. Tummy time is not something we generally think about in the NICU. We think about prone positioning from time to time, but not tummy time, because we do, our babies, when they go home and they do that. We are starting to talk about tummy time as being something that we're starting to think about earlier than that, much earlier. We have the conversations all the time, and then around 32, 33 weeks, then we really start to actively talk about tummy time as a developmental position and linking that with head shape and plagiocephaly. We're talking a lot about safe sleep and when to transition our babies to safe sleep. So that's another thing that we're working on. And there are some policies that are in the works and they're just about finished. And so we've all had kind of input into that. So it's great to have this kind of a committee together so that we can talk about all of these things in one place. And, we've been doing this for a long time now. And it's just we all communicate very well and we get things done, quite frankly. And then we talk about read, sing, and talk, which is another initiative that we have in our NICU. If we want to talk about positioning considerations, this will be the place to do it. And if we need a developmental care plan, once babies particularly are getting close to term age, it's a good time to start thinking about, what we need to do to make this family successful when they go home. Lots of discharge teaching. And then, of course, unattended babies would be a really big thing to talk about should be talked about in medical rounds anyway, if that baby is unattended. And we actually have an unattended babies care path that we developed a number of years ago now. And it was approved by the Neonatal Care Committee. And we're still kind of working through that because COVID put a big wrench in our plans for making that plan a reality. But it's something that we just talked about again a little while ago, and that we have a working group that will start to tackle that. And then, some of the barriers, of course, time constraints are the big things, and staff. Everybody's busy. Rounds are already really long. How do we fit it in? So, we talk about developmental care rounds, being part of rounds, maybe just once a month or once a week. And that we talk about the SENSE program at that time and really leave it to families and let them guide the conversation about what development should look like at their baby's gestational age and how they can support their overall development. So the next steps for us in our group, we're going to create a working group to reimagine bedside rounds from the ground up. So to change it completely and talk about what that could look like. We used to do family learning sessions, and we did that years ago as a pilot project, and we would like to start doing those again. I'm not sure how it would look. Likely it would be a virtual kind of offering. And then adding developmental care, a full day of that to staff orientation eventually. And that's something that we talked about a couple of years ago that was very exciting. And then we are going to implement SENSE 2, hopefully in the next little bit. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That was awesome. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay,
yes.
Good. I wanted to make sure you were still getting me. So I have a few questions, and then if other people have questions that you want to put in the chat, feel free to do that. But my first question is, why hasn't developmental care been prioritized in medical rounds to begin with? It seems almost natural to me, but
Yeah, you know what? That's a really great question, but it's like anything, changing it up is hard. And that's a lesson that we learned really early on, that even though that the evidence is there, like, we know this stuff. Everybody knows this stuff. It is, if we're looking at, if we want to provide the best care for our families, developmental care has to be a part of the equation. There's just too much evidence now to ignore that. So I think it's just, honestly, time constraints, resource constraints. Everybody's stretched thin, particularly this day and age, with COVID and all of that really threw everybody for a loop, right? So I'm not saying it's never going to happen. It's just going to take us a little while to get there. So it's like anything that's worth doing, right? You really have to work hard for it and push for it. And honestly, we have, I feel like at the IWK anyway, through this committee, we have accomplished so much. And we will accomplish this also. It's just going to take a little bit of time, I think. Yeah.
have you had any feedback from families about this since it's kind of been taken more to the bedside than just conceptual?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you want to look anecdotally, there's never bad feedback when you take the time to talk to a family about their baby. It's because usually what they're getting is the medical side of things, right? They don't look at what your baby is capable of. How amazing. Look how amazing little Jimmy is. He's so tiny, but he can really communicate with you. Look at how he's looking at you. It changes how they think, because we don't want our families to go home and be shell-shocked. We want them to feel like they're competent and that they're a team, that they're in it together. So something as simple as the thing that I find really floats my boat is when I'm with a family who's getting ready to go home, and you might offer them to do something completely normal with their baby that they hadn't thought about, like go for a walk. It's a sunny day, go for a walk. And they look, what? Yeah, just go for a little walk. We can? Of course you can. And so we forget to offer those normal experiences to families when they're in this situation. And honestly, the feedback that you get from that is, I can't believe how good that felt. Thank you so much. I forgot that we could do things like this. And that stands for anything, getting your baby out for skin to skin. Parents are sometimes really afraid to ask, especially early on. So to not forget to ask those questions. So I feel like in medical rounds, those things get forgotten. We don't talk about skin to skin. We don't talk about, we're getting close to discharge. How's your baby? So how's tummy time going? Right? And to talk about why tummy time is important, and why our babies go home and hate it. And how can we help? Talking about head shape. There's so many developmental parts that we could be talking about that get lost, and then discharge comes around and we're scrambling to try to kind of cram all that information in, and families can't take it in at that point. Right? It's too much.
Yeah. This SENSE program you talked about, it starts when a family is admitted into NICU. And so can you talk a little bit about what families can do? Like if they're with a very early baby, a lot of times that's when families feel like there's nothing I can do. The team need to do all the intervention and help my baby. And so that I find is a discomfort that families have, especially if they have a very premature baby. And so how do they do developmental care with a very preterm?
I know. And you're afraid to say, hey, what can I do?
Right.
Right. And you have to think about the trauma that's involved in that. Sometimes the trauma response is to just step back. So it's great when staff steps forward and says, oh, I know this is really scary, but there's so many things you can do right now. And sometimes you just need something to do to feel like you are, and then it does things for baby and parents, so the way the sense program works is it looks at all of the senses. So it looks at vision, hearing, it even looks at the sense of movement and body awareness, which we don't often think about. So it could be as simple as skin-to-skin care. That's a conversation that needs to happen day one. There are very few instances where skin-to-skin care can't happen. And when it can't happen, then it's a good conversation to have around, well, how can you provide that kind of support to your baby if you can't have them skin to skin with you, right? You provide that hand hug, right? Or one finger hold. There are lots of ways to do that. And Sense actually advocates for parents doing the transfers into skin to skin, right? Not nursing. Even from very early on, that nursing provides the support and parents do the standing transfers. So they get comfortable at that, so that when the time comes, they don't have to wait for someone to come by and help them get their baby up. They can just do it. It's their baby. Why not? So there are, the sound of your voice. So very early on, things like reading, singing, and talking to your baby. And Sense tells us, that it should be for tiny babies. It's a low whisper. And so it lays it out in black and white. These are the things to try. When we look at movement and body awareness, I love this one because it's something that gets missed all the time, because we don't think about when a baby's in utero, they're experiencing all of your movements. That primes their vestibular system, the proprioceptive system for movement, right? You don't get movement without having movement. And so babies are missing out on that vestibular input. So I just talk about, when you're getting your baby out for skin to skin, have a little dance party, right? Do a little slow rock back and forth, up and down, maybe a turn in a circle, just to get that vestibular system kind of online and prime it for it, because it's so tied into sensory development and motor development, and it's really important. One of the other things that the Sense programs talks about is, we do a lot of nesting and supportive positioning in the NICU, which is important. But we forget about the fact that babies also need to move. When they're in utero, they're flipping, right? They're pushing against the walls of the uterus, even with their heads, right? Their feet, their arms. And so we need to switch up their positions from time to time, but we also need to give them room to stretch out and explore the space around them. So Sense is beautiful because it has changed with the evidence, more and more evidence that comes out. So I've noticed, like in the Sense 2 program, they talk about, with every diaper change, as you take everything out of the bed space, you give your baby, while you're getting stuff ready for the diaper change, you give them time to just, boogie woogie and explore the space around them. So that they had that opportunity. But one of the things that they've added into the Sense 2 program is that you allow your baby at that time also to explore a number of different positions. So that might be, you let them explore their space when they're on their back, but maybe you also let them explore that space while they're on their tummy, because those two things look different. They target different parts of the body, of the body. So I really like that. And then they also started to incorporate tummy time as being, because tummy time wasn't in there in Sense 1. Now tummy time is in there in Sense 2. I'm sure that lots of clinicians had lots to say about that, which is why it's in there. So it's such an easy way to have a conversation, to sit down, even if your baby's 23 weeks, right? To sit down and have a conversation about, this is what sensory motor development looks like. This is what your baby can see and hear now, and this is what you can do to support them. Honestly, if everyone did skin-to-skin care for 24/7, we wouldn't need to have this conversation. I say that all the time. Yeah. It's not feasible, right, when you're in the NICU, but that's where development would. So skin-to-skin as early and often as you can would be the best way to support development. And if you can't do that, then a hand hold, hands on baby really firmly. Yeah.
Let's talk about the relational side a little bit of this, because we've talked about body movement and all that kind of thing, and medical and neurodevelopment. Now it's all tied into this, but how does relationship play a role in these interactions, or even addressing neurodevelopment issues on rounds?
I mean, if you're talking about relationships, we could talk about relationships between families and healthcare professionals, right? Between babies and their families, siblings, and it's huge. It's healthcare professionals with other healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
But I think when we start the conversations really early and we talk about the importance of relationship, it just facilitates more of that. You know what I mean? And what it does for neurodevelopment for babies, it also does really beautiful things for families, right? And for everybody in a family. And when we're open and when families feel supported and listened to, it's really great when you can sit with your whoever's providing care to your baby that day, right? Or with the therapist that comes in, if you can just really sit and have an honest conversation about all developmental care. Families really get into it. I mean, that's what they want to talk about, their babies. And so if you're facilitating relationships, it really does, it makes for a better experience for everybody involved, I think. Yeah. It really changes the game. Yeah.
And we're talking long-term outcomes too, right? I think sometimes we have
Huge.
this very immediate,
Mhm.
which rightly so in some ways in NICU, the immediate outcomes, but for families, like, we're looking at our kids and seeing long-term, what are we looking at for outcomes, and
Yeah.
we want our kids to be able to develop solid,
Yeah.
beautiful relationships.
Yes. And we know that developmental care creates better outcomes. We know that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? We know that having these conversations and providing care in this way just creates better outcomes, better cognitive, better social emotional, better mental health outcomes down the road for babies. Yeah, because we do get stuck in the, you know, this day, right? My baby is 26 weeks gestational age. Everything is really scary. You do tend to get stuck there. But that baby is going to go on to have enjoy relationships with their people. They're going to go to school. They're going to have peer relationships. And we can't forget that the things that happen in the NICU can color everything that happens. From here on, it's no pressure, but I mean, that's what we know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For the people who are watching this, who are interested in starting this in their health centers, what advice do you have for them? How can they do something similar?
Oh my goodness. Find your people, right? Find your core group of people who are interested in this and get together and have a conversation. So for us, it was that we would just have conversations at a table or passing in the hallway. And then it would be a few of us, would have a coffee and talk about it. And then it was like, we need to do this. And then it turned into, putting together a day of learning for everybody, for all of the staff, which is a big undertaking. But we do NICU education days throughout the year. And so it was just as simple as taking one of those days and making it all about developmental care. And I would say, as long as you just find your people, it will take on a life of its own. Yeah. The other thing I would really recommend is looking into the SENSE program, because it was really a game changer for us. And I think in terms of evidence-based care, you're not going to get any better than that. Right? It's highly evidence-based. It's really easy to use. It's inexpensive. I think it's less than $200 to purchase the program. It's easy to educate staff using the program. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great, and I'm really excited to see where the IWK goes with this. Like you said, it feels like we're just getting started, even though it's been this super long journey to even get to this point. I'm excited to see where we go from here. So
Yeah, me too.
thank you. Yes, thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and expertise with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us today for these Preemie Chats as well. CPBF is a charitable organization that believes that through education and support, families will be empowered to care for their baby. Visit their website, canadianpreemies.org, and consider making a donation. Together, we can create a brighter future for all of our families. Join us next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, as we speak with a cesarean recovery coach about navigating C-section recovery with a NICU baby. I hope to see you there.